Well, a very short test in the build-up to the first Grand Prix, the Bahrain Grand Prix, just 3 days of testing at the same circuit, Bahrain. A few questions answered in the testing, but nothing really clear until the cars appeared on track. Even so, on Friday, a lot of question marks still out there, a lot of provisos. Yeah, how much fuel are they running? But we can draw some conclusions from what we saw today. There was some very, very impressive long runs, incredible reliability up and down the grid, you got to say. Obviously, this far into the new technical regulations, reliability is going to be improving year by year, but very impressive to see the number of long runs on the track today in the afternoon session, or the evening session. And also, of course, the inevitable red tyre, soft light fuel runs as well. So let's have a look at those with no more ado, because the statistics say everything, of course. So here's what happened in the cool of the early evening with the track temperature at 27 and ambient 23, about what it will be for the race on Sunday. Fernando Alonso, quickest in the Aston Martin, and he looked very good in the morning session as well. The Aston Martin looking to be very drivable, to the point where Lance Stroll, who had a big accident on a road bike, was unable to make the Bahrain test, just stepped into the car and still with quite a lot of pain in his hands was able to get into it very, very quickly. That's obviously credit to Stroll, but also says a lot about the drivability of the Aston Martin. I say drivability under the heading of without losing any of their aero efficiency. So they've done a very, very good job at Aston Martin over the winter. They've obviously got a really good package in terms of what the aerodynamics can do. And I put in brackets there, you can see the top speed they did on the main straight, the pit straight. Alonso 30.9, Max Verstappen 31.0, virtually the same top speed. So there's a major change straight away from 2022, when we saw Red Bull consistently having a margin with which to play when it came to top speed, but now their nearest rival doing the same top speed, or put another way, Red Bull not particularly quick in a straight line. I say you've got to have some provisos, because it could well be that Red Bull are just running artificially more wing than they need to at the moment, and perhaps even running fuel in the car. Who knows? We won't really know, of course, until qualifying tomorrow. But on the supposition that it is a relatively equal battle out there at the moment in terms of these times on Friday. Look at that. Fernando Alonso 30.9, Max Verstappen 31.0. How happy would Fernando be about that? He's had his critics over the winter saying, Fernando, what are you doing leaving Alpine to go to Aston Martin, another midfield team? But look, it's a really good car. And probably Fernando had a feel for the quality of the engineering at Aston Martin now. It's really, really good. Some very good people there. And it's a good car. It's a good car. It was a reliable car today. And Fernando looking, he could make a few mistakes, get away with it. Typical Fernando Alonso fashion, and he looked really good in the car. It looked as if he was really enjoying himself in terms of body language in the car. So 30.9, Max 31.0, virtually the same in terms of top speed. Sergio Perez, the Max's teammate at Red Bull, virtually the same time, looked very, very good throughout the day, looked to be pacing his weekend, looked to be in charge of what he was doing in terms of radio, just the way he was running the car. Yes, slightly longer corners still than Max Verstappen. Nothing has changed in that respect over the winter. And yes, as he comes out of turn 9 into 10, he's braking with a little bit more load on the car. At the pace they're going at the moment, which is not the absolute limit, of course, you can get away with it. But the way Sergio's driving through 9-10, as I've often said on this channel, two of the best corners, I think, in Formula One, the leading of the very, very fast turn 9 kink into that very tight turn 10, the left-hander, where often you see them locking up the inside front. But that's such a critical corner, because there's a very, very long back straight immediately afterwards, and that will penalize any mistake that is made through there. So that is where Max looked really, really good today, I thought. He was making a lot of mistakes elsewhere on the lap, braking a bit too late here, running a bit wide there, typical Max on a Friday, but I'm sure he'll have it all stitched together beautifully on Saturday and Sunday. So let's have a look a bit further down, see where Ferrari are. Charles Leclerc 31.3, he'll be okay with that, I guess. 3.21 suggests that maybe they got a little bit of top speed with which to play there in terms of maybe putting on a bit more wing. But out of the box, the new Ferrari clearly not as good as the Aston Martin. That will be the news ultimately that will be filtering through to Maranello. So Ferrari about where they were last year, you got to say. Super competitive. They will win races this year. They're right up there. But at the moment, Aston have done a better job than Ferrari over the winter, it would appear. And then look at Nico Hülkenberg, 31-3 in the Haas Ferrari. Welcome back to Formula One. I wonder if anybody will ever take Nico Hülkenberg seriously as a really, really good Grand Prix driver. This journeyman driver over the years, it all went wrong for him when he got that pole in Brazil for Williams, and basically nobody's ever believed in him ever since. Yeah, right. You tell me what's going on. Anyway, Mr. Stand-in, Mr. Journeyman, really, really good job. 31-3. And Haas super quick last year in a straight line, but not so much this year, which shows that they've got a lot more efficient downforce in that car as well. Lance Stroll recovering really well, just stepping into that car. Did one run on medium tyres and went out on softs and was pretty quick straight away. And that just shows how good I think the Aston Martin is. 31-4 for Lance Stroll, and not particularly quick on the straight that lap for some reason. Pierre Gasly, very typical Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, 31-4. Let's just have a look where they are relative to McLaren, 31-5, really close. This is the team, of course, that Oscar Piastri didn't want to race for, and he's gone to McLaren. But at the moment, it would appear that as if Alpine have got a slightly quicker car. But Lewis Hamilton, the quicker of the two Mercedes drivers, 31-5. And now the good news for Mercedes is that it's not 31-5 and a dismally slow top speed. They are actually very competitive in a straight line. So much so that they can possibly, like Ferrari, possibly take off a bit of wing. But Lewis looked really good in the car. I mean, I've gone on and on and on about it at turn 9, 10, how good he is through there. And he was just brilliant, I thought, watching him today. But 31-5 compared with Fernando Alonso, 30.9. This is the first race for the brand new Mercedes where they've learned all their lessons, and they won Brazil last year, remember. And it's looking very worrying for them. Very, very worrying. I did say over the winter, for those that weren't watching or listening perhaps on the live streams, that it was very clear in the weeks after Brazil last year that Red Bull made a big mess of that weekend. Their correlation and their predictions on ride height for the first time in the 2022 season were way off, and they're running much too high, and they could do nothing about it because it was a sprint race weekend and they were locked in to their Parc Fermé setup on the Friday, and that's what happened. And I did make the point over the winter that we shouldn't get too excited about how quick the Mercedes was, relatively quick in Brazil, because it was just a terrible weekend for Red Bull, and that was kind of proven, I think, at Abu Dhabi. And here we are, it's kind of proven again, because if Mercedes went into the winter thinking, yeah, we've kind of cracked this, let's go gung-ho forward with the concept we've got, look where they are. Obviously, you know, to be kind, let's hope that they get it together. Let's hope that there's a lot more in the bag that they can use there to play with. But it's not looking great for Mercedes right now, I've got to say. McLaren, yeah, just a little bit slower than Alpine. Lando 31.5. And Oscar Piastri 32.0. Good job, really, by Piastri to give him his due. But then he would do quite a good job, wouldn't he? No pressure. He's in a McLaren, hasn't got to do anything except be near Lando, and did a good job. Guan Yu Zhou, I thought, went well in the Alfa Romeo, as did Valtteri Bottas. Kind of below the radar, but it looks to be a more competitive car out of the box compared with the Alfa last year. George Russell did not have a good day, at one point complaining about bouncing as well on the straight. So, yeah, not good for George. And the other two that don't show up there at all are Alex Albon and Logan Sargent in the Williams. And we'll get onto that in a minute, because actually both of them did a very good job. So let's have a look at what happened then when they went out and did long runs. And as I say, it was really impressive to see how many laps were put together. Pirelli would have just loved it, because there's so much data coming in. I'm sure as I speak now, all that data is being analysed. There's so much of it from every team. Just look at the number of laps they were all doing. But there you can see how competitive Aston Martin are right now compared with Max Verstappen. So let's have a look there. Fernando Alonso, starting with Fernando, 36.2. 36.4, 36.7. So out of the box with fuel in the car. And again, we don't know how much fuel Aston are running relative to Red Bull. But why wouldn't they be running the same fuel. Why wouldn't they be running the right amount of fuel for that sort of run? You've got to assume that they are, although, assumption is not always the safest way to go. Anyway, out of the box, the Aston Martin slightly quicker. Maybe Fernando at this point is putting a little bit too much energy into the tyres, because as they get to the middle of the stint, you can see how impressive Max Verstappen is with his runs, 37.1, 36.8, 37.2. That 36.8 really impressive at that point. And then towards the end, unlike Fernando, Max does a really slow lap. 56 gets some temperature out of the tyres and bounces back with a really, really strong finish. 37.2, 37.1, 37.2, 37.5. And that shows, I think, that over the Grand Prix distance on Sunday, Red Bull have a really, really good car and probably have the edge over Aston Martin, but very, very close. And again, just to reiterate the point, look how close Aston Martin are to Red Bull in terms of top speed on all those laps as well. And Sergio Perez really just underlining everything that we're seeing now with Max Verstappen as well. Slightly slower, but really, really consistent. He can just reproduce those laps forever. And he obviously just loves that place as well. I mean, it is where he won, of course. And then we look at Ferrari, and you can just see there, you can just look at it and just see everything is just a little bit more of a struggle for Ferrari. 38s out of the box, 37.9, 38. And at this point, Fernando's doing 37s, 36s. I mean, that's really, really good. And maybe Charles thinking, okay, I want to get a long run here. We'll take it easy on the tyres. And he ends up doing 37.5, 37.6. And that's kind of okay. But I got to say, it's a really impressive run by Fernando compared with the two Ferraris there. Carlos Sainz, very, very good as well. Consistent. Had a big lose this morning through 9:10, and it was interesting because it was a classic example of there was a bit of bouncing in the car, I got to say, in defense of Carlos, and the back end just sort of dug in. But when something like that happens and you've got the amount of load, G load, lateral load that he's got in the car, and he's trying to get on the brakes to get the thing stopped, that's why it spun. And that is why, I'm not saying that any car is perfect through there, but if you've got the car much straighter by taking a wider line through 9, almost on the marbles, just to give you a perfect, what Rob Wilson would call flat car braking area, as Lewis does, as Max does, as Charles does, then if the car is going to bounce like that, you've got much more chance, or the inside front potentially is going to lock, you've got much more chance of getting on top of the car and making sure you don't lose any time. That's what that is all about, that 9-10 sequence that I keep talking about. And that was the difference today between Charles and Carlos. You saw it absolutely in Technicolor. Really impressive. Leclerc through there as well, I've got to say. Anyway, Carlos Sainz recovered well from that, and a very good run. And again, you can see that Ferrari, in terms of top speed with fuel in the car, where are they? 297. That 318 at the end of Leclerc, I'm sure, is a toe, so we shouldn't do anything on that. But 297, yeah, they're slightly quicker on average, probably, than Red Bull and Aston Martin. So that's just a little area with which they can play. And now have a look at Lewis Hamilton. I mean, it doesn't make happy reading, does it? You've got Fernando out there having fun in the Aston Martin, 38.0, 37.2, 37.5 in the middle of his run. And simultaneously, Lewis Hamilton's doing 38.4, 38.3, 38.4, 38.5. I mean, the consistency of those laps by Lewis shows that is what Mercedes can do. That isn't they're running more fuel or they're doing anything weird. That is Lewis Hamilton at his very best, unable to do anything other than be, half a second off the pace, if not more, with fuel in the car. So it's really, really dispiriting. As I say, though, they are relatively quick in a straight line, so that's one of the saving graces for Mercedes at the moment. But right now, they will be scratching heads for sure, and they'll be thinking, wow, this is not what we expected. Let's just have a look now at how they finished in terms of, this is much more significant, I think, than the soft tyre empty fuel runs. This is with fuel in the car, and I've put them in order in which when they did their long runs, not all of them ran the soft tyre for the long run, as you can see there. And you can see how they finished according to the compound they ran. This is why I want to mention Alex Albon at this point. Look, he ran the hard tyre on the fuel run, 37.3, and he was really impressive. So we shouldn't in any way ignore that. That was a really, really good run by Alex Albon today on the hard tyre, I thought. out of the box, out of the pit lane, Fernando is 0.6 quicker than Max Verstappen. What does that mean? Does that mean Max went into that run thinking, I'm going to make these tyres last, I'm not going to cane them early on? Probably the latter, and maybe they're running a bit more fuel as well, but I'm only just giving you thoughts to mull over before we get into Saturday tomorrow.